Welcome to another exciting episode of the Insurance Untangled Podcast. I am Naren, one of the co-hosts of this podcast. As all of you know, we are dedicated to helping practices that are tangled up with insurance. We talk about topics that help you take more control and create a bigger and better future for you, your patients, and of course, your team members. Today, my guest is my dear friend and fellow co-host, Ben Tuine. Hey, Ben, how are you doing today?
Hey, Naren, great to be with you. Looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, this is an awesome topic because I think it applies to pretty much 90% of our listeners. And the topic is, how do insurance plans like Delta pay out of network? How do insurance plans like Delta pay out of network? I think it's a great topic because many of you are in the process of getting untangled from insurance, dropping the first plan, dropping the second plan, and hopefully one day dropping all plans. But definitely you are on the path. So this is a question that many of you are asking. Okay, I'm going to go out of network. How would Delta pay out of network? So let's jump in, Ben. I have a few questions for you. Let me start with the first question. Is there a standard that insurance companies follow when compensating out of network benefits?
That's a really good question, Naren. The answer to that is yes and no. So there's no industry standard. It's more so the norm, right? Quote unquote, the norm. And the norm for Delta Dental, as an example, since they've been the largest dental plan to date for many years, but also one of the first organizations to be developed to sell dental plans, is the norm for Deltas to have a mix of benefits, right? That the employers can kind of customize for in-network and out-of-network. And a lot of what we're seeing is that there are different packages that employers buy. Some employers in some states buy a package where the out-of-network benefits is pretty good. Other employers would sort of create a benefit package to influence patients to only go in network by severely cutting down on out-of-network benefits. And one of the states that comes to mind where a lot of the out-of-network benefits for patients that have a Delta plan, where those out-of-network benefits are bad, is Washington State. So if you were to drop Delta in Washington State, what you'll find is just a mixed bag of out-of-network coverage where most of the plans are written in a way that penalizes the patient, right? And that's one way for patients to be influenced to go in network, simply because they can't get full access to their benefits if they go out of network. Now, many years ago, Naren, the state of New York sued the medical insurance companies because of this issue, where, in the specialty realm in medicine, a lot of specialists don't even participate with any insurance plan. They're fully fee-for-service practices. And when you're faced with having insurance and the only specialist you can see is not in network, and none of them are in network, what happened back in the 2000s is that the state of New York investigated the insurance carriers for not covering much benefits for patients that had no choice but to see an out-of-network physician. So long story short, New York sued the insurance industry and said, hey, look, number one, you're using incorrect percentiles to assess out-of-network for patients, and you're using a system that is placing the financial burden on patients who have insurance onto the patient who's insured, right? And New York's opinion was this shouldn't be the case. Patients, if you're giving patients the opportunity or at least flexibility to pick any dentist, an open provider network, then the insurance plan should be committing more towards benefits. So that was that particular effort by the state of New York was targeted towards medical insurance plans, not dental insurance, but plans like United Healthcare, MetLife, Aetna, Cigna that sell both medical and dental insurance. What happened was they then were forced to have a standard out-of-network protocol, right? Which sort of helps the industry, or at least helps patients that choose out-of-network. But Delta Dental, because they weren't part of that lawsuit between the state of New York and the insurance industry, what you find with Delta is they're an entirely independent system to assess out-of-network that sometimes is not in the best interest of patients, sadly.
Right. This is awesome. I think that story you just shared with us, Ben, really gave us some context on what happened. From what I hear, like most of the time, it's pretty reasonable, right? The way the out-of-network patients are taken care of. Yes, there are few cases, even I have come across, where the employee has signed up or the employer has signed up with a plan that's very restrictive. The minute you go out of network, you have to pay like a lot more. But in my experience, I work with Gary and quite a few practices. It rarely happens, and it only happens in certain situations. But I think it's a good idea to investigate. Like if you have, let's say, 100 patients from a particular employer, you may want to just look into it just to make sure, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good idea. Like we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's just interesting that the out of network benefits are different by state, and then by insurance plan, right? Which is kind of interesting to where I think the direction that we're headed now is that eventually there'll be a standard system that the insurance companies will be forced to use to assess out of network.
That's awesome. Let's kind of get into some specifics. I know you touched on it, but what's the standard out-of-network guideline for Delta? Or did you already answer that question by saying, well, there's no standard?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give a few examples because it's different in every state. Washington State, as an example, if a doctor's out of network, Delta Dental will not accept assignment of benefit, meaning they won't allow you to receive reimbursement on behalf of the patient. So what that means is that your financial policy has to be one where you're collecting in full at the time of treatment from patients and advising patients that their dental plan will reimburse them directly. That's not the end of the world. In fact, that's probably the direction that many fee-for-service practices are trying to get to these days, is not having to deal with any level of insurance administration. But that's what Delta's doing in the state of Washington. But if you're practicing in the state of Iowa, Delta Dental in Iowa does accept assignment of benefit out of network. In fact, I'm hearing a rumor that Delta for this year, 2023, is approving assignment of benefit out of network in 31 states. I don't yet have a full list of those 31 states, but the minute I do get my hands on it, of course, we're going to do another episode to kind of disclose that information to the public. Arizona, that they'll pay the patient, and Wisconsin, they'll pay the patient. Well, excuse me, Arizona, they'll pay the dentist. The patient. Wisconsin, they'll pay the dentist. Excuse me, I'm kind of confusing things here, but the point I'm trying to make is that depending on your state, Delta may send you the reimbursement if you want to accept assignment of benefit, but that policy is different state by state. In terms of actual benefits, I think Washington State is the worst, where Delta severely cuts benefits for patients, right? Like your pro fees are now, patients are required to pay 20, 30, or 40%, right? Whereas in California, a lot of your preventative by a lot of Delta plans are still covered at 100% of whatever the out-of-network allowed fee is for Delta Dental in that particular area, or that for what that employer selected. So on that part there, in terms of the standard of out-of-network, it's totally across the board. But fortunately, if you have only one location, you can simplify that by researching that for the major employers that you have patients from. You can contact Delta to request what their out-of-network benefit policies are. And a lot of the Delta reps would be happy to share that with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I know we talked about Delta, at least in some states, send the check to the patient. Is that something you see other insurance companies do as well for out-of-network patients?
Yeah, so the other plan, or a common one that doesn't accept assignment of benefit out of network, are Blue Cross Blue Shield plans and United Concordia. Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's not every state. Some states, Blue Cross Blue Shield is totally fine sending the checks to the doctor. In some states, they're just like Delta. So I'd say Delta and Blue Cross are sort of in that same category, where accepting assignment of benefit out of network is totally entirely dependent on your state, right? And then with United Concordia, it's sort of been global, that nationwide, they'll send the checks to the patients. Although I'm hearing from some doctors that are out of network that are trying to accept assignment of benefit, in some parts of the country, United Concordia does send the patients, the check to the practice. So again, if you're wanting to know that information, just contact the insurance company in your state to find out those policies. And every insurance carrier is not shy about giving the information out. They'll happily provide that upon request.
Perfect. My fourth question is, I've heard about this thing called Fair Health. Do many PPOs use Fair Health? And by the way, what is Fair Health? And my understanding is Fair Health is a way to process payments out of network.
Yeah, good question there. And so Fair Health is a not-for-profit that was created by the state of New York. The state of New York used, so that example that I mentioned in the beginning, where the state of New York sued the insurance industry, the insurance industry ended up settling out of court, and they've agreed to collectively give the state of New York or pay $100 million. And that was more so a way to close the case quickly and allow the state of New York and the insurance industry to create a better standard for out of network. So Fair Health was created out of that $100 million, or at least a portion of that settlement money. And the whole purpose of Fair Health was to rewrite the standards for out of network. Before Fair Health, insurance companies were using a database called Ingenix. And Ingenix it still is a usual and customary fee database, right? It's a fee schedule database. Well, back before this happened with Fair Health, state of New York and the insurance industry, Ingenix was owned by United Healthcare. So with that being the gold standard on fees, owned by an insurance company, huge conflict of interest, which was another reason why the state of New York decided to get involved. But essentially, Fair Health is now independent, right? Ingenix agrees to use Fair Health data. And essentially, that data that Fair Health pulls is uninfluenced, right? It's just real, pure data with no motivation behind it, right? The old Ingenix firm, the percentiles were designed to save insurance companies money. Well, in this case with Fair Health, they created a better standard that gives independent, free information to the public and to dental and medical practices on where fees are at, based upon what practices are charging for procedures, combined with economic conditions in those communities, where Fair Health comes up with a better assessment on out of network, or at least usual and customary, right?
Right.
Most insurance carriers still use Fair Health to determine out of network benefits, and the standard in dentistry that most insurance companies use is the Fair Health 80th percentile, which means that if I, as a doctor, submit a claim and I'm out of network, and if my office fees are at or below the 80th percentile, a lot of insurance carriers would allow 100% of your fees when they process the claims. So in a roundabout way, Fair Health, the development of Fair Health has really improved out of network standards for most insurance companies.
Yeah, I just was on fairhealthconsumer.org. I clicked on the dental section, and then I just typed in my zip code and I typed in fillings, right? And it's telling me like white fillings back to 2 surfaces. And I click on get your cost, and it's telling me that out of network uninsured price is $350. So that's typically in that particular zip code, people are charging $350, the out of network uninsured price. And then the averaged allowed amount is $218. So it's kind of really, really useful tool, I guess, if you are, if you are a, if you are an insurance company. And then they even give you a breakdown. They say typical provider charge $350, and then that's $850 of the 80% of the practices charge $350 or less, and then typical plan will pay $280. So the out-of-pocket cost is $70. So it's a really good tool. Is that what you're referring to? Is there anything more to Fair Health than what I just explained?
That's spot on. So that particular fairhealthconsumer.org is primarily written for consumers, for patients.
Okay.
So that individual patients can have some knowledge of what procedures cost, what the out-of-network fees are, what the average in-network allowances are, and so forth. But it's also very helpful for dental offices to understand that as well, because we're all patients, right? So we're all legally entitled to use that database. But you can at least see and get a sense of what in-network and out-of-network averages are in any community.
Right. So in the same neighborhood that I looked up in Chicago, a thin veneer, for example. Anyways, so it's interesting. They're telling you, how much would be covered and so forth. Let me ask you this. Is that a separate website for dental practices, or they are supposed to use the same fairhealthconsumer.org?
Yes. So for physicians and doctors of any type in medicine, you can go to Fee Estimator,
Okay.
So I'm not employed by Fair Health, nor do I get any commission from them at all. Since studying Fair Health,
It's a nonprofit.
I fully believe that this is one of the best standards to use when it comes to fees. But if you go to feeestimator.org, you can actually purchase the percentiles for your community. But there's a number of resources on feeestimator.org that are 100% helpful to dentists as they understand, their fees, the insurance fees, and how that all works together. Check that website out if you're a doctor, if you want to learn more about the Fair Health database.
Yeah, fee estimator, from the looks of it, you have to pay for it. So, they'll give you a database of information as opposed to you check things one by one, right? Is that what it is?
Correct. That's right.
So you give you a zip code or whatever, and they'll tell you like all the fees for dentistry, and it's telling me it's going to cost me $400 for my zip code.
Yeah, they'll give you the entire percentile breakdown for this year, and share that with they'll show that's what you're purchasing is the percentile breakdown for your community.
Right. And for that same money, you can configure up to 5 specialty and those geo zip codes combinations.
Correct.
Perfect.
Correct.
Let's continue. So my 5th question is, let's say I want to drop insurance. Is it necessary for me to know what a dental plan pays out of network before I do that?
Good question. I think at the very least, it's important to understand if the patient does have out-of-network benefits, right? So a lot of dental practices that drop, Aetna as an example, a lot of practices aren't unaware that Aetna has PPO and EPO under the same contract, right? So PPO, EPO, which is exclusive provider organization. And exclusive provider organization means the patient can only go in network. So if you drop Aetna and you don't properly notify those patients that have EPO, when those patients come in, they're paying 100% of your office fees for every single procedure, right? So you could easily upset a whole lot of patients if you don't know that. So understanding that is important. And then the part about what dental plans pay out of network, it really depends on your philosophy. Like some practices, the only level of checking that they do to get ready for out of network is they'll find out if there are benefits or not. And if the answer is yes, there are benefits, then the next step for them is to eliminate assignment of benefit, where they're charging patients in full and letting patients get reimbursed on their own. So a lot of practices go that route to eliminate all insurance administration in the practice, right? Create more of a direct relationship with patients, still help patients prepare a claim, but letting the patients get reimbursed on their own. So that's route number one. The other route, which is a more popular route, is that dental practices will still go to the extent of verifying eligibility and benefits out of network to give the patients a similar breakdown of benefits and an estimated out-of-pocket like we do when we're in network, right? And many practices do that to minimize change among patients, to influence patients to not be angry or upset about the big change of going out of network, right? So if you're going to accept assignment of benefits and you're going to give patients a benefit breakdown as an out-of-network provider, then yeah, you really want to know what these plans charge, or at least what they compensate out of network, so you can give patients accurate out-of-pocket estimates. So those are 2 options that I see that are most common in dentistry, Naren, on how to deal with out of network.
Perfect. Thank you. So my last question is, if a listener has more questions about this very complex topic about, dropping PPO plans and figuring out out-of-network benefits and all that stuff, are there any resources available? I know you touched on a few, so if you can expand on that, that'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably one of the number one resources on, out-of-network journeys in general, of course, is our dear friend Gary Takis. You can visit his website we'll post that in the show notes there, but there's a number of them, right? There's I Love Dentistry community, a Facebook page, as well as a podcast dedicated to that community where you can learn more about out-of-network benefits. But so this is something that we study on a regular basis, that we're going to be releasing more information on my private website, veritasdentalresources.com. And our mission is to collect as much information and post it on our website as an educational means to help dental practices learn more about out-of-network. But if anybody has any questions about specific out of network and what's covered in an area, just email me directly. My email is ben@veritasdentalresources.com. Veritas is spelled V as in Victor, ERITAS. So ben@veritasdentalresources.com.
We're going to include all those links, lessinsurancependence.com, I Love Dentistry Facebook group, veritasdentalresources.com, ben@veritasdentalresources.com, and of course, the Fair Health consumer site. We're going to put all of those in the show notes so you can grab all of that. Ben, I learned a ton as always. You are just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this messy world of, dealing with insurance companies. Thank you so much for your expertise and, of course, putting a lot of time and effort into, bringing this knowledge to our listeners. I also want to take a minute to thank our listeners. We cannot do what we do without you. So if you enjoyed today's episode, hey, don't forget to share it on social media with your friends. We also appreciate your reviews. So write a review for us on iTunes or Google Play. And till we meet again with another amazing episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast, don't forget to visit our website, insuranceuntangled.com. Thank you.